Welcome to One Mission, the podcast. Rick Lance here, your host, and today we're delighted to have Kevin Blackwell, a dear friend of mine who's been related to and working with Samford University the last 11 years. He has a lot of hats to wear there, but one of them is he does the Ministry Training Institute for people who want to go back and get training or never had any training to begin with, and he has really spearheaded that in a lot of creativity, a lot of ingenuity, and I've admired what you've done there, Kevin. And also, he's a veteran pastor as well, and we're glad to have him, a good family man, godly man. And today we're going to talk about a number of things, but Kevin, we always begin with a good testimony of what the Lord's done in your life. Can you just walk us through that and the pilgrimage?
Well, it's an honor, Dr. Lance, and thanks for having me as well. Thanks for your mentorship in my life, along with so many others across the state. We're so grateful for you and the legacy that you're living for us. Just so grateful for your leadership. Well, I love to tell that story because it's my story. It's my gospel story. Right. What you would refer to as a prenatal Southern Baptist, you know. Yeah. Right. I grew up at Cottage Hill Baptist Church in Pleasant Grove, Alabama, there. Really knew about the Lord my entire life. I could still remember the day very well when I was 12 years of age at Vacation Bible School, my last year of VBS there. And Roy E. Morgan had been the pastor of that church for a number of years. Brother Morgan was my pastor as a child, and Brother Morgan stood up that Thursday morning, and like a lot of pastors, he gave a clear articulation of the gospel message. And for the first time in my life, I understood it that day. And he called us young folks forward who wanted to make a decision, and I came down, and that was an important moment. Maybe even a more important moment happened 2 days later when I met with him and my parents in his office to make sure that, I understood what it meant to be a Christian. And so that was my salvation experience. Yeah.
And you're called to ministry.
Yeah. So I was saved when I was 12. My call to ministry took place when I was 15. So too young really to understand fully of what all that meant. But again, it happened there at Cottage Hill. I was a sophomore in high school and just sensed God's call on my life, not knowing really what that meant, but knowing that it was significant. And so I spent the next few years pursuing that, trying to understand it, being mentored by people within my congregation. I had opportunity to do some ministry activity within the church. I led music some Sunday nights. I didn't know really what I was doing, but I knew I was serving. So, and then did some work with the youth as well. And I had gotten to a point after high school that I really had just kind of wandered away, frankly, from that calling. And frankly, I wasn't a very good Christian, if I could confess that to you.
You can now.
I can do it now. And the Lord, through a series of events, just really called me back into that calling and got me focused again. And a name that is familiar with many Baptists across our states, Dale Wood. Yeah. Dale was the new pastor of Cottage Hill, and I'll never forget Dale, Brother Dale. He knew that God had called me. He knew I was running from it, and he called me on the carpet on it. And I was not in school at the time, and he asked me why I wasn't, and I didn't have a good answer. And he put me in his car and drove me to Samford University to meet with an admissions counselor. And I thought, well, there ain't no way they're going to let me in Samford University. At this point, I was 22, somewhere around there. Okay. And so Dale met with that guy and me and basically put his reputation on the line, said, hey, this kid right here is going to be okay if you'll let him in. And I'd gone to Jeff State and didn't do very well, and so my transcript looked really messy. And so I'll never forget the admissions counselor looking at me and saying, well, I'm going to give you a shot, but you just need to know I'll be watching you. And I thought, well, this is going to be the best 3 months of school, I've ever had, because that's about all I figured I would last. Well, I ended up graduating from Samford, and from all that experience, recommitted to that calling. Right. And God did a significant work on a Sunday evening at a small church that I was attending an event at that night, and just really revealed himself to me clearly. And I was serving my first church 6 months later, and I've been going ever since.
Well, we have some parallels. 12 years old, my story in Vacation Bible School, and also related to a Shaco experience. So 12, and then 15, I felt the call to preach. Now, I did go straight to Samford. Didn't have those wandering years you had, but you learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
You don't want to go through it again, but you learn a lot from that.
I did, and I've helped others who have been through the same wandering.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, that is a heartwarming testimony.
Yes, sir.
Tell us what, I kind of outlined it, but tell us what you're doing now at Samford and what you have been doing.
Yeah, it's been such an amazing last 11 years. I was pastoring in Hueytown at Valley Creek and had been there for about a decade, and had taken the church through a revitalization effort there. And God had really done a very significant work in that church, and I really thought I was going to be there for a good while. And an email from Andy Westmoreland changed my direction, and Andy asked for me to come and meet with him, and so I did, and that began what I'd now recognized, but didn't at the time, was about a year-long interview for a job I didn't even know was really going to be a job. And so Andy, in November of 13,
I remember all that.
invited me to join his staff and as assistant to the president for church relations, and primarily to focus on our Baptist partnerships. And so I prayed about that. My wife and I prayed about that and felt like that was the direction God was leading us to. And part of that, when I reported the work in that first January of 14, part of that also involved the Samford Extension Division, which has been around for a long time, since 1947.
Yeah.
I had never even heard of it before.
I was a part of it when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had never heard of it before, and the first time I'd heard of it, I was the director, so literally the first day. So I'm still doing that, still working now for Dr. Taylor, our president, doing church relations, and still leading what is now known as the Ministry Training Institute of Samford University, as well as working in our Christian ministry department as part-time faculty, doing some teaching there. And with our athletic department as the voice of what
you
now
enjoy
is,
that.
Yeah, I love it. What is now Pete Hanna Stadium, calling the Samford Bulldog football games and hosting the Chris Hatcher Coaches Show. So, and whatever else they're going to ask me to do next week.
Pete Hanna was, when he was on the board in his latter years, I served, we overlapped. I was coming on, he kind of finishing up before his passing. Outstanding man, very quiet, but an outstanding businessman, a good Christian man too.
He's very generous to Samford. We're grateful.
He has been.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a good encapsulation and summarization of what you've been doing through the years, what the Lord's been doing in your life. Now tell us about your family, because we're family people.
Well, I have an amazing family. It starts with my wife that we celebrated 29 years of marriage last week.
Oh, congrats.
And I married the daughter of a minister and a granddaughter of a minister. So she understood what she was getting into. Yeah. Her name is Lori, and I tell everybody I married a Pell City Panther. So she's an amazing person. We have 4 children. My oldest daughter, Maggie, she's 26, and she's a social worker. Yeah. And my middle daughter is Andy, and she is a nurse at UAB. My youngest daughter is Avery, and she's a pharmacy student at Samford. And my son, we adopted him in 2010 from China. His name is Brody, and he is going into his sophomore year at Samford. So it's always an adventure around my house. Yeah. Something going on.
You had a girls' dormitory there for a while.
I did, and I was a pretty good cheer dad in my day. I'll tell you that. So
well, that's good.
Yeah.
One of the passions that you have that you've exhibited so well in Alabama Baptist life, and let me say parenthetically, you have an enormous amount of relational equity with Alabama Baptist, and not only now, but when you were a pastor, but even more so now as you've been able to travel the state and be a part of what happens in every place in Alabama, almost. And MTI is everywhere almost.
Yes, sir.
So you've got the name recognition. In fact, if I were to ask somebody what are the 5 best-known Alabama Baptists, your name probably one of them.
Appreciate that, Atlantis.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask you, though, you've got this passion that you're helping us with at the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions and working alongside Craig Carlisle, our convention president, calling out the called.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Well, it all started with a phone call from Craig Carlisle, who is, all of you know, is our current state convention president and the associational mission strategist there in Etowah County. Craig was dealing with some issues there in his association with just not seeing the number of resumes that he would want to see for particularly his bivocational pastorates that currently had an empty spot.
Right.
And so he called me. He said, "Hey, can I come and chat with you? And I just need to talk to somebody." And I grabbed my colleague, Scott Guffin, also well-known among Alabama Baptists, to join that conversation because I just thought Scott probably is going to be a good contributor here. Well, I think Craig reached out to me for 2 reasons. One, he knows that I love him. He's a friend.
Yeah.
And we could chat confidentially and
Right.
at the time. But also with the work that I'm doing with the Ministry Training Institute at Samford, that's kind of our bread and butter.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know of anyone in the state as far as educational institutions that are training people for those types of opportunities more than we are right now.
I agree.
So there's this fall we'll have 48 locations. Now those are all over the country, including three prisons, which is crazy. But also Spanish sites. So we've got a number of bivocational ministers within our program receiving that education. So I guess he knew that I kind of had my thumb on that. So we met. We spent about 2 hours together just chatting about it. And as we were talking, I told Craig, I said, "Craig, you're not the first associational leader that's had this conversation with me." And so my suggestion to him was, look, we can talk about some possible things here that can help, but I think this needs to be a larger conversation. So why don't we grab some guys from across the state that are going through this kind of ubiquitous situation, and let's bring them together to the table and let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation. Thinking we'll bring them to Samford, we'll grab some of our association leaders from across the state, and just let them talk. And that was really the plan. And so I brought them to Samford in June of 23. We had our first meeting, and what I thought was going to be our only meeting, and I just sat there, Dr. Lance, and listened to these association leaders talk for 2 hours. And you could just kind of feel that there was a bit of a sigh of relief, frankly, in the room, that Craig's struggles were also struggles that other association leaders were having across the state. And they just were sharing stories. And so by the end of that conversation, the decision was made that we keep the conversation going. And so we decided to meet again and then again. And pretty soon, we were developing the calling out the college strategy. And, of course, at that time, we reached out to the State Board of Missions, kind of let them in on what was the conversation. And that's what it was going on. And, of course, State Board of Missions was already thinking about these things. So it just presented, I think, the perfect opportunity to bring together Baptist leaders from across the state to have, I think, very important conversations on this subject. So that's now turned into a little over a year of conversation. We now put together a comprehensive strategy on calling out the call for the state convention, which is needed. So just to give you some context, and so that we understand what our team is referred to as a growing crisis. That's the term that I keep hearing across the table.
Bigger than people think.
Yes. In 92, the median age of pastors was 44. Today, that has risen to 54. And the number of pastors under the age of 40 is 15%. And so now that's broader than just our state convention. But I think our state convention is a microcosm, probably.
Could well be.
Those statistical numbers. And so there's more full-time pastors over the age of 65 than under the age of 40. Now. And so, well, what that tells me is not only do we have guys aging out,
right,
but we've also, I think, with the COVID situation, it just kind of, exacerbated some things that were laying there already. We had guys that just simply quit. They dropped out.
I know some of them.
Yes, and so that just made the crisis even more telling. And of course, also related to that conversation, we continue to see a growing number of minister positions within our state convention that are becoming bivocational. And so
is true.
These opportunities are growing, but yet over here, the number of people who recognize the call of God in their life, who've responded to that call and are being equipped toward that calling is not as big as it needs to be. So herein lies kind of this chasm that we have. And so our strategy is going to help our convention to hopefully get ahead of that curve a little bit. It's not going to happen overnight. This is going to take several years probably to really see an impact. But I think we've got the bones for it right now in place, and we're just going to continue to build from that.
One illustration comes to my mind of the growing need. Some 20 to 25 years ago, what we call now worship leaders, we had 450, don't hold me to all these numbers, 450 full-time ones. That number is about 250 now, which means even in some larger churches, they're having Bible worship leaders.
Right.
It's not uncommon at all. In fact, we just came from a meeting of this task force, and I made the statement that if you are a trained high school band leader and love the Lord and devout Christian, it's not if you can be a worship leader, it's just when and where.
Where.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's one component. And then the thing that really created a lot of mystique in my mind about the bivocational ministry particularly, most of us, and I had it too for a while, had this view that usually this is farmer, small town, whatever, maybe less educated, whatever. But that's just one part of being a bivocational minister. There's a whole demographic that's wider than that. In fact, we have a number of people who teach in colleges as well as on the high school and level, whatever, principals. But I was at a church not terribly long ago, and I did not know the pastor well, and he had me there for I guess, a dedication of some kind. Maybe it was an anniversary. I got to know him. He had 2 PhDs, and he was teaching at a local college and also one online, and serving that church. It's a pretty good-sized church. Mm-hmm. That's a phenomenon to me.
I mean, it gives you the sense that that bivocational role, there is just a number of people coming from all walks of life and every age groups that are out there serving. You're right. It is. There's an interesting kind of plurality in that role right now. But man, we need to continue to press Alabama Baptists related to creating a culture where we are calling out the called. Of course, the local church is ground zero for that, and that's where it needs to happen. I mean, state convention can have an impact, it can have influence, but knowing the autonomous nature of what we do as Alabama Baptists, that has to happen at that local church. So that's what we're trying to resource the churches. That's the goal here, to create that type of a kind of ecclesial culture.
Yes. Very much so. We also heard a stat that didn't surprise me because it's been inching up over a period of time. It's going to gallop out in the future. Is something like 60% of bivocational pastors are bivocational, 60%. And that number on other staff positions would probably be closer to 80
90.
Yeah, way on up there. So this is a growing need, and the Lord does the calling, but some people need prompters, humanly speaking, to help them understand. Just like you and I have had people speak into our lives and say, yeah, I really think the Lord's calling you. And I don't think that's presumptuous. I think it's just helpful.
Well, it is. I think all of us that are called had someone speaking into their life.
Absolutely.
Like I say everyone has a Del Wood,
Yeah.
at some point in their
True.
life. And I guess my concern, Dr. Lance, with this is in the last few years, we've kind of lost our focus a little bit on that aspect of pastoring.
Yeah.
We problem solve a lot. We sermon prep a lot. We do administrative things. Particularly during COVID, there was a number of things we were having to deal with. And I think some of that's been to the detriment of that really important Paul Timothy role that
Yeah.
we play of, kind of finding who that Timothy is that you need to be investing in. I'm convinced that God has not stopped calling people in ministry.
That's right.
We know that's happening.
And they're calling them later. He's calling them in later life, too.
Yeah, not just the 19-year-old, but the 40, 50, and sometimes 60-year-olds
That's right.
into ministry. So God's still calling. We just have to make sure as churches that we have a culture in our church that encourages them to respond positively to that calling. Well, ministry is the most wonderful thing in the world to be a part of.
Absolutely.
It's hard, but
And
there's
that
no
would be true.
but there's no greater. I don't think there's a greater privilege in the world,
Right.
to be able to serve Jesus in a local church and be a part of something just this phenomenal that's 2,000 years old. In a sense. So
I've noticed that Southern Baptists have been, through the years, very good at descriptive analysis on a problem. We're less good at a prescriptive one. And what you're seeking to give leadership, and we're fleshing this out as we speak here, actually, in subgroups and whatever, is we're trying to prescribe a strategy to create a culture of sensitivity to the calling, for lack of a better way to put it. And we're going to do some of that at the state convention. You have a role in that, and I know you're not going to be able to tell them what you're going to say, but you might give us a teaser, a trailer for the movie, so to speak.
right, yeah, and we want to leave some suspense, right?
Yeah, that's right. Got to have some music in the background too.
Well, what you'll see at the state convention, you will see from the stage. We'll be presenting the strategy to the convention at that time.
Right.
We're also in the process of developing a website that will
Yeah.
be a resource kind of landing spot for churches to be able to find ways to call out the call. We've landed on 4 priorities within this strategy, and we'll be unveiling those priorities in the months to come, and then initiatives under those priorities as well. So, so the website will be driving folks to that. We'll be explaining the priorities and the initiatives at the convention, but we'll also have a booth set up in the exhibit hall with some information there as well to help pastors to, in other words, basically here's the thing. What can we do to help you?
That's it.
What can we do to help you? And let's do it together. Yeah. That's the plan. So we just want to see seismic change take place here in the next few years related to this crisis. So that's a little bit of the teaser.
Yeah. Well, you're a good one to give leadership to that, and we're glad to be able to partner with you. And there is more to come, listeners, and this is a topic and a concern, a prayer concern for all of us, that we pray a Matthew 9:35 through 38 kind of prayer, that the Lord of the harvest will bring forth people into the harvest.
Yeah, that's been a theme verse for us.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, we always like to conclude by asking someone, how can we best pray for you?
I appreciate you asking that. Well, as this is being aired right now, we need prayer. Just continue to pray for Samford as well.
Right.
We are about to perhaps have our largest freshman class in school history coming to campus. Lots of capital projects going on campus.
Yeah.
Particularly for the ministry training institute, we launch our next year. A lot of happening there. Pray for me as I lead that program to be impactful, to make disciples who are making disciples. I think that's so important. So just I want to be wise. I want to be Christ focused. I want to love people more deeply. So and frankly, be a resource person for Alabama Baptists. That's a tremendous love in my life.
Well, you do it well, and we're proud of you. Well, listeners, let me tell you, we've had a treat today to be able to talk with our friend Kevin Blackwell, who is giving exemplary leadership in an area where we need it now, and that is helping people understand, explore the call to ministry, call from God. And you be in prayer with us regarding this. And until next time, when we have another very interesting guest, we want to thank you for listening to One Mission Podcast.